Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. Valentine's Day was supposed to help save my marriage. I left work early with a bouquet of white lilies and an envelope holding reservations for a cabin in the mountains. Sabrina had been working late for months, and I figured we both needed a few days away from everything. She didn't know I was coming. That was the point. When I arrived at Sterling Dynamics, the lobby was packed with employees. Red roses decorated the entrance, and a photographer was setting up lights near the main atrium. The receptionist smiled when she saw me. "You're just in time." "In time for what?" I asked. "The surprise." I smiled. "Well, I've got one of my own." She pointed toward the crowd. "They're all inside." I thanked her and walked toward the atrium. More than 100 people stood around a small stage. Then I saw Sabrina. She was wearing the navy blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. She looked nervous. Standing beside her was Richard Dawson, the company's CEO. He adjusted the microphone and smiled at everyone. "I've been waiting a long time to do this." The crowd started clapping. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out a ring box. I stopped walking. He got down on one knee. "Sabrina," he said, "you've made every day better than the one before. Will you marry me?" She covered her mouth. She looked shocked. Then she smiled. A slow, genuine smile. "Yes!" The room erupted with applause. Richard slipped the ring onto her finger, pulled her close, and kissed her. Not a nervous kiss. A familiar one, like they had done it many times before. That's when Sabrina looked past his shoulder. She saw me. Her smile disappeared instantly. The color drained from her face. "Jimmy?" Richard turned around. His confident smile vanished too. He took one step toward me. "Sir, I can explain." I looked him in the eye. "No, you can't." Then I looked at Sabrina. "So this is why you've been working late." Tears filled her eyes. "It isn't what you think." I glanced at the ring on her finger. "It looks exactly like what I think." I held up the flowers for a second. "I came here to surprise my wife." I dropped them into the nearest trash can. I guess someone beat me to it. I turned around and walked out. Before I reached my truck, my phone started ringing. "Sabrina." I declined the call. It rang again. I declined it again. Then I made one call of my own. "Melissa," I said as soon as she answered. "Clear your afternoon." There was a short silence. "What happened?" "I'll explain when I get there." "I'll be waiting." Melissa Parker, my attorney, was already waiting when I arrived at her office. She took one look at me and frowned. "This doesn't look like a business meeting." "It isn't." I told her everything. The proposal, the ring, and the kiss. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she closed her notebook. "What do you need from me?" "I need to protect myself, personally and financially." She nodded. "We can do that." I stood up. "I'll call you tomorrow." "Take your time," she said. "I'll be here when you're ready." I nodded and walked out. I didn't go home right away. I parked in an empty lot across town and sat there while my phone lit up over and over again. Sabrina called. Then she called again. A few text messages came through. "Please answer." "It's not what you think." "Please come home." I didn't open a single one. When someone lies to you for months, explanations usually come too late. An hour later, I pulled into our driveway. Sabrina's car was already there. She was waiting on the front porch. The second she saw me, she hurried over. "Jimmy, please." I walked past her and unlocked the front door. She followed me inside. "I know what this looks like." I looked at her. "Then we don't have a problem." She flinched. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." "What part?" "The proposal." "So you knew he was going to marry you?" Her eyes dropped to the floor. "I knew he wanted to." I nodded once. "So you weren't shocked?" "I was shocked he did it in front of everyone." "But you still said yes." She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I walked into the bedroom and pulled a travel bag from the closet. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm leaving." "Don't do this." "I already am." She stepped in front of me. "Please, just hear me out." I looked at the ring still sitting on her finger. "Take it off." She stared at me. "What?" "The ring." Her hand slowly closed around it. I said, "Take it off." Without another word, she slipped it off and placed it on the dresser. Neither of us looked away from it. "How long?" I asked. She took a shaky breath. 8 months. I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because it finally explained everything. The late meetings, the weekend conferences, the business trips that somehow kept getting extended. You kissed me every night after seeing him. Tears rolled down her face. I never wanted to hurt you. No, I shook my head. You just decided hurting me was worth it. She covered her face. I was going to tell you. When? She couldn't answer. After he proposed? Silence. After you moved out? Still nothing. You had 8 months. She slowly lowered her hands. I made a terrible mistake. I looked her in the eyes. No, a mistake is forgetting an anniversary. I picked up my bag. This was a choice. Then another, and another. As I walked toward the front door, she called after me. Is there anything I can do to fix this? I stopped for a second. Without turning around, I answered. No. I walked outside and climbed into my truck. Before I pulled away, my phone rang. It was Melissa. Jimmy, she said. I looked into Richard Dawson. What did you find? She paused. I think there's something about him you need to know. I started the engine. Tell me tomorrow. Right now, I had something more important to deal with. My marriage was over. The next morning, I woke up in a hotel room. For the first time in 11 years, Sabrina wasn't beside me. I expected to feel angry. Instead, I felt clear. I showered, got dressed, and drove straight to my office. Melissa Parker met me there. She was already waiting with 2 cups of coffee. You look better than I expected, she said. I've had all night to think. And? I don't want revenge. She nodded. What do you want? The truth. Melissa slid a folder across the table. I did some digging on Richard Dawson. I opened it. Most of it was public information. Business articles, company records, property purchases. Nothing unusual. Until I reached the last few pages. What's this? Former employees. I looked up. What about them? 3 people left Sterling Dynamics within the last 4 years after filing complaints against Richard. What kind of complaints? She folded her hands. Nothing criminal, at least nothing they could prove. I kept reading. Each complaint sounded almost the same. Richard got close to female employees, promised promotions, mixed business with personal relationships. When things fell apart, they quietly resigned. No lawsuits, no headlines, just people walking away. I closed the folder. So Sabrina wasn't the first. Melissa shook her head. Not even close. As I left her office, my phone buzzed. It was Sabrina. This time, I answered. Jimmy, I'm outside your office, she said. I know. She sounded surprised. You saw me? I saw your car. There was a long pause. Can we talk? We're already talking. You know what I mean. I looked across the parking lot. She was standing beside her car. She looked exhausted. I walked over. She didn't try to hug me. She knew better. I met Richard this morning, she said. What did he have to say? He told me yesterday was a misunderstanding. I almost smiled. And you believed him? No. She looked down. Not anymore. I stayed quiet. For months, he kept telling me you were controlling. I shrugged. He kept saying you didn't really love me anymore. Did you believe him? She hesitated. At the time? Yes. I looked at her. What changed? She took a slow breath. Yesterday, after you walked out, I asked him if he'd been lying to me. And? She swallowed hard. He told me none of it mattered anymore because I'd already chosen him. I said nothing. That's when I realized he never cared about fixing anything. He only cared about winning. I looked away for a moment. That was all I needed to hear. For the first time since Valentine's Day, I wasn't thinking about Sabrina. I was thinking about Richard. Because a man who deliberately destroys another man's marriage isn't just selfish, he's dangerous. And I had no intention of letting him walk away without facing the consequences. I didn't call Richard. I drove straight to Sterling Dynamics, not to make a scene, to hear him explain himself. The receptionist looked nervous when I walked in. Mr. Brooks, Richard is in his office. I know where it is. Nobody tried to stop me. When I opened the door, Richard was standing by the window. He turned around slowly. I figured you'd come. I figured you'd hide. He forced a smile. I'm not hiding. No? I closed the door behind me. Then let's stop pretending. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. I didn't plan for you to find out like that. I laughed. You mean by watching you propose to my wife? He looked away. I cared about Sabrina. You cared about winning. His jaw tightened. You don't know what our relationship was. I know enough. I took a step closer. You knew she was married. He didn't deny it. You spent months convincing her our marriage was already over. Still nothing. You kept telling her I didn't love her anymore. He finally spoke. She believed me. I looked him in the eye. Until she didn't. His jaw tightened. And you proposed anyway. He didn't hesitate. I wasn't going to give her time to change her mind. That told me everything. He wasn't in love. He was afraid of losing. I looked him in the eye. You never wanted Sabrina. He frowned. You wanted to beat me. His expression hardened. You think this is about you. It became about me the second you decided another man's wife was your prize. For the first time, Richard lost his confidence. He looked like a man searching for the right words. He couldn't find them. I turned toward the door. One more thing. He looked up. Sabrina knows you lied to her. His face changed. What? You told her I was planning to leave. You told her I stopped loving her. He stayed silent. You built your relationship by tearing mine apart. I opened the door, and that's why it's already over. As I walked into the hallway, my phone vibrated. It was Sabrina. I answered. Jimmy? Her voice was shaking. I just quit. I stopped walking. You resigned? Yes. I couldn't stay there anymore. I nodded to myself. It wasn't going to save our marriage, but it told me she had finally stopped choosing Richard. Where are you? I asked. At home. I'll come by. There was a long silence. I don't expect forgiveness. You shouldn't. I need you to hear one thing. I walked toward the elevator. You've got one chance. I never stopped loving you. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. Then I answered with the truth she'd been avoiding. You may believe that? I looked at the closing doors. But people don't betray the person they love for 8 months. The line went quiet. I hung up. I wasn't thinking about Richard anymore. I wanted one thing, the truth, whether Sabrina was finally ready to tell it. When I got back to the house, Sabrina was sitting at the kitchen table. The engagement ring was gone. So was her wedding ring. A folder sat in front of her. She looked up when I walked in. I've been waiting. I know. I stayed standing. She didn't ask me to sit. I quit today, she said. You already told me. I couldn't work there anymore. I believe you. She looked surprised. You do? I believe you quit because you finally saw who Richard really is. She lowered her eyes. I should have seen it sooner. You should have. The room fell quiet. Finally, she slid the folder across the table. I printed everything. I opened it. There were emails, hotel reservations, text messages, calendar entries. She had printed every conversation she'd had with Richard over the past 8 months. I wanted you to hear it from me, she said, not from him. I flipped through the pages. I don't need to read this. You should. I already know enough. She looked at me. No, you don't. I stopped. What don't I know? The affair didn't become physical right away. I didn't react. We spent months talking before anything happened. She swallowed hard. I kept telling myself I could stop. But you didn't. She shook her head. No. Why? Tears filled her eyes. Because he made me feel important. I nodded slowly. And I didn't? You did. Then what was missing? She wiped her face. The excitement. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I quietly said, So you traded peace for excitement. She couldn't argue, because it was true. I hate myself for it. I closed the folder. That won't change anything. I know. She looked at me with red, tired eyes. I just needed you to know I wasn't trying to replace you. I almost smiled. You accepted another man's proposal. She lowered her head. I know how that sounds. No. I shook my head. You know what happened. Another silence filled the room. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Is the divorce already filed? Yes. Her shoulders dropped. I figured. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply nodded. I deserve that. I looked at her for a few seconds. You know what hurts the most? She looked up. I would have forgiven almost anything. Her eyes filled again. But I would have had to hear the truth from you. She closed her eyes. I was afraid. I know. You would have left. I nodded. Probably. She let out a slow breath. So I kept lying. And every lie made leaving easier. She couldn't deny it. As I turned to walk out, she stopped me one last time. Jimmy. I looked back. What happens to Richard? I shrugged. He'll deal with the consequences of his own choices. And us? I looked at the wedding photo still hanging on the wall. There isn't an us anymore. I walked out of the house knowing something had finally changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. And sometimes that's a lot harder to come back from than anger ever is. The divorce took 6 months. There were no courtroom arguments, no fights over money, no long meetings between lawyers. Sabrina signed the papers. So did I. By then, there wasn't anything left to save. A week later, Melissa called. "It's over." "What is?" "The board finished its investigation." I leaned back in my chair. "And?" "Richard was fired this morning." I wasn't surprised. "They're also suing him." "For the company funds?" "That, and several other things." I nodded. "Good. They wanted me to tell you something else." "What?" "They asked if you'd be interested in taking over as CEO." I smiled. "No. You don't even want to think about it?" "I already have." "And?" "I built businesses because I enjoy building them." I looked out the window. "I don't need another title." Melissa laughed softly. "I knew that would be your answer." About a month later, I ran into Sabrina by accident. I was leaving a coffee shop. She was walking in. We both stopped. Neither of us expected the other to be there. "You look different," she said. "I feel different." She nodded. "I heard you're doing well." "I am." "And the company?" "They hired someone else to run it." She smiled faintly. "That sounds like you." "What does?" "Walking away when everyone expects you to stay." I looked at her for a moment. "I didn't walk away." She frowned. "I just stopped holding on to something that was already gone." She looked down. "I've thought about that every day." I figured. "I'm seeing a therapist now." I nodded. "I should have done it years ago." "Probably." She didn't argue. "I spent a long time blaming Richard." She looked me in the eye. "But the truth is, he couldn't have taken anything if I hadn't opened the door." I believed her. Not because she wanted me back, because she wasn't asking for anything. "I'm sorry, Jimmy." "I know." She smiled sadly. "I guess this is goodbye." It already was. She nodded once. Then she turned and walked into the coffee shop. I kept walking to my truck. I didn't look back. Not because I hated her, because there was nothing behind me anymore. Sometimes people think strength is getting even. Sometimes they think it's making the other person suffer. I learned it was something much simpler. Strength is knowing when the story is over, and having the courage not to read the same chapter again. The next Valentine's Day came around faster than I expected. A year earlier, I'd walked into Sterling Dynamics carrying flowers for my wife. This year, I walked into my office carrying nothing but a cup of coffee. Funny how much life can change in 12 months. Business was good. The companies I'd invested in were growing. I had more time than I'd had in years. More importantly, I had peace. The kind you can't buy. The kind that only comes after you stop trying to fix people who don't want to be different. That afternoon, Melissa stopped by my office. "You've got one more thing." She handed me a plain white envelope. "No return address." I opened it. Inside was a short handwritten letter. It was from Sabrina. She wrote that she'd moved to a small town outside Denver. She'd taken a job managing operations for a nonprofit. No executive title, no late-night meetings, just honest work. Near the end of the letter, one sentence stood out. "Richard didn't ruin my life. I did that myself the day I stopped protecting our marriage." I read it twice. Then I folded it and slipped it back into the envelope. Melissa looked at me. "You going to answer?" I shook my head. "No." "Why not?" "Because she's not asking for another chance." Melissa smiled. "And if she was?" I looked out the window. "My answer would still be no." She nodded. I figured. That evening I drove home. The house felt different now. Quieter, not empty, just peaceful. I poured myself a drink and sat on the back porch. For the first time in years, I wasn't wondering where my wife was. I wasn't checking the clock. I wasn't making excuses for someone else's choices. I was simply living my life. My phone buzzed. It was a message from an old friend. "Dinner tomorrow?" "It's been too long." I smiled. "Sounds good. See you at 7. That was the difference. A year ago, I would have canceled because Sabrina had another late meeting. Now my time belonged to me. People often ask how I got over what happened. The truth is, I didn't. I grew past it. There's a difference. You never forget the day someone betrays you. But eventually you stop letting that day decide every day that comes after it. Looking back, I realized something that would have sounded impossible a year earlier. Finding Sabrina with Richard wasn't the worst day of my life. It was the day I finally stopped believing lies. Not Richard's lies, not Sabrina's lies, my own. The lie that love is enough when respect is gone. The lie that loyalty only has to come from one person. The lie that staying makes you stronger than leaving. It doesn't. Sometimes walking away is the strongest thing a man can do. I started Valentine's Day believing I was surprising my wife. Instead, I discovered the truth about my marriage. It hurt. It changed me. But it also gave me something I'd been missing for a long time: clarity. Once you have that, you never settle for less again. Thank you for watching.